Yeah, our CBS News partners revealing some new GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, tracking the movements of the boat Nolan Wills was on before he disappeared July 4th.
For 2 weeks, a name has carried more weight than almost anything else in the Nolan case, precisely because so little was known about the person attached to it. A name without a full story. 2 people were with Nolan Wills in his final confirmed minutes on Horn Island. Nolan's friends, and a young woman they only ever referred to by her first name. For nearly 2 weeks, one of those 2 accounts stayed almost entirely out of public view, while the other was repeated so many times it started to sound like established fact. Tonight, that changes, because what Katie says happened does not match what his friends have told investigators, and a family that has already lost their son now has to sit with the possibility that somebody, somewhere in this story, isn't telling them the truth. Think about what that means for 2 parents who have spent every day since July the 4th trying to understand how their son's holiday trip ended the way it did. It isn't enough for them to know what happened. They need to know who they can trust to tell them. There's more waiting for you tonight. Tracked GPS coordinates showing exactly where a boat went, hour by hour, on the day Nolan disappeared. A record that doesn't care about anyone's feelings or loyalties, only about what actually occurred. A grand jury, now officially in motion, carrying this case somewhere it has never been before, and a set of small, strange details his own parents still can't make sense of. Details that have nothing to do with online rumors or viral posts, and everything to do with what actually happened on a barrier island off the coast of Mississippi. Before we start, a quick note. This case centers on the death of a young man, so if that's a heavy topic for you tonight, please take care of yourself as we go. And if you want to follow this case as it develops, hit subscribe now, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. Because a family somewhere is hoping the right person sees this and remembers something they haven't shared yet. Let's start with the name that took 2 weeks to surface, and the fear that came attached to it. Nolan had a conversation with a young woman on the beach. His friends would later refer to her only as Katie. That's where the confirmed information stopped, for a long time. Katie's identity wasn't in the first wave of coverage. It wasn't in the early statements from the family's legal team, while speculation online chased down pool parties and out-of-context video clips. The one person who may have spoken with Nolan last sat almost completely unidentified, unaware, most likely, that her name would eventually matter this much to strangers she had never met. Part of the reason traces back to the very first night he went missing, a night that, for his mother, must have felt like it stretched on without end. According to someone who was on the phone with Christine Wansley as she tried to figure out where her son was, Katie's name entered the conversation almost by accident, mentioned as someone Nolan had wanted to stay behind with. And then came a detail that made an already terrifying night considerably worse. Word that Katie herself might be missing too, with nobody on that call able to say who she actually was, or where to even begin looking for her. Picture that moment for a second. A mother already searching for one missing child, suddenly told there might be 2. No name to attach to the second worry, no number to call, just more fear, stacked on top of fear that already had nowhere left to go. That particular fear turned out to be unfounded. Katie was never missing. She had left the island safely that day on a different boat, and had been reachable the entire time. Confirmation of that came not from police, and not from Nolan's friends, but from her own mother, Gracie McCormack, who posted publicly to correct the record once speculation about her daughter started spreading online in ways she never expected. According to McCormack, her daughter was on Horn Island that day, spent time with Nolan, and the 2 parted ways sometime that afternoon. She says her daughter has no knowledge of anything that happened to him afterward. She said goodbye to him. She got on a different boat. She went home to a mother who had no idea, at the time, that her daughter's name would soon sit at the center of one of the most talked-about cases in the country. If that were the whole story, it would end there, quietly, the way most small footnotes in a larger tragedy tend to end. It doesn't, because attorney Ben Crump, representing the Wells family, says Katie's account of that final conversation is specific and hasn't wavered, and it conflicts directly with what Nolan's friends have said. According to Katie, Nolan told her he was planning to rejoin his friends and get back on their boat before they left the island. According to the friends themselves, Nolan told them the opposite, that he intended to stay behind on the island with Katie, entirely by his own choice, in his own words. Both statements cannot be accurate. One of these two accounts is wrong. And somewhere behind that single word, wrong, sits a family who has to live with not knowing which one it is. If Katie's version holds up, then something happened in the space between Nolan stating his intention to leave and the boat actually pulling away without him. Something interrupted whatever plan he had. Nobody has explained what. If the friend's version holds up, then Nolan made a deliberate, conscious choice to remain alone on a remote barrier island as his only ride home departed without him, which raises an entirely different question about what happened to him in the hours that followed, alone, without the group he had spent the whole day with. This isn't a theory pulled from a comment section, or a claim built on speculation. It's a direct contradiction between two people who were both there, describing Nolan's last documented words in two ways that simply cannot be reconciled with each other. And right now, as of this recording, nobody, not the family, not the investigators, not anyone with the authority to say for certain, has resolved it. Nolan's parents are left holding two versions of their son's final choice, unable to know which one is real. There's a particular kind of pain in that specific uncertainty, one that's different from grief itself. Grief, terrible as it is, at least has a shape. It's the loss of a person you loved. But this is something else. The loss of even knowing your own son's last decision. Did he choose to stay, or did he intend to come home? For most families, that would be an easy thing to answer, pieced together from a dozen small confirmations that never even register as important until they're needed. For the Wansley family, it has become the single hardest unanswered question in their son's entire case, and nobody has been able to hand them a real answer yet. Now, beyond that conversation, there are smaller inconsistencies the family has raised publicly, the kind of details that would never make a headline on their own, but that add weight the longer you sit with them. Start with something as simple and as easy to dismiss as a piece of clothing. The official police report lists Nolan wearing black shorts at the time of his disappearance. But according to Christine Wansley, a young woman who was on the island that day later reached out and shared photos with her, showing Nolan in blue shorts, not black. On its own, it sounds like nothing. A clerical slip, a misremembered detail. But try to see it the way a mother sees it. A mother who no longer has the ability to simply ask her son what he was wearing that day, or why, or where he went afterward. For her, that detail isn't a footnote to move past. It's a thread. And once you begin pulling on one thread in a case built almost entirely on other people's memories, you cannot help but look for the next one. Then there's what happened before Nolan's body was even found, while his parents were still holding on to hope, still half expecting a phone call that would end this nightmare with relief instead of grief. They went to retrieve his car from a friend's driveway, a task that should have taken minutes. According to the family, it turned unexpectedly difficult. A friend came to the door claiming he couldn't find the keys. He went back inside to check again. Minutes passed, the kind of minutes that feel endless when you're standing on someone else's porch, waiting, with your missing son somewhere out there and no way to reach him. Eventually, the keys turned up exactly where another person, overheard on a phone call, happened to mention they had been the entire time. Sitting on top of an Xbox, inside the house. For a family already desperate for anything resembling a straight answer, a delay like that doesn't read as coincidence. It reads as friction, appearing at the exact moment they needed things to be simple. And then there is Nolan's phone. According to a family friend who helped track the device down using a monitoring application, Nolan posted to Snapchat almost every day, the kind of habit so consistent it barely registered as a habit at all, until it stopped. In the 24 hours before he disappeared, that activity went completely silent. No updates, no posts. A silence that everyone close to him agrees was simply not like him. When the device was finally located, one more inconsistency surfaced. The location tied to the account didn't even match the place where the phone itself was ultimately found. Consider what it must be like to sit with that particular detail as a parent. Nolan's digital life had been, by every account, an open book. The kind of constant, casual documentation so common among people his age that nobody thinks twice about it. And then, for exactly the window of time that matters most, it goes quiet. Not gradually, not with warning, just silence. In the 24-hour stretch his family would give almost anything to understand. It's easy, watching from the outside, to treat a detail like that as a clue in the way a mystery novel treats a clue, something with an obvious explanation waiting just around the corner. For Nolan's parents, it isn't that simple. It's one more piece of their son's last day that doesn't behave the way the rest of his life did, and they don't have the luxury of treating it as a plot point. They have to live with it as an open question, indefinitely, until someone gives them a real answer. None of these details, taken individually, tell us exactly what happened to Nolan Wills. But together, according to the people who loved him most, they're the reason this family says they cannot simply accept the official account as complete, and why they continue, night after night, to ask questions nobody has fully answered yet. While all of this has been unfolding in the background, the contradictions, the small unexplained details, the quiet work of investigators trying to reconstruct a single afternoon, Nolan's family has also had to do something no parent should ever have to plan for: say goodbye. Christine Wansley announced that her son's homegoing celebration would be held on Monday, July the 20th, at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, the same community that watched Nolan grow up, play football, and become the young man his coaches and teammates describe with such consistency. A place that once celebrated his signing day now has to prepare to lay him to rest. And it's worth remembering, underneath every headline and every piece of tracked data, that this is still, fundamentally, a family grieving a son in front of an audience of millions they never asked for. That's part of why accuracy matters so much here. Every detail in this case is being absorbed not just by strangers online, but by two parents who will carry whatever gets said about their son for the rest of their lives. They don't get to walk away from this story once it stops trending. They live inside it, permanently now, and the only thing anyone watching can really offer them is care in how their son's story gets told. If you want to keep up with every confirmed development in this case as it happens, subscribe now, because what we're covering next isn't based on anyone's memory, or anyone's account, or anyone's version of events at all. It's based entirely on tracked data, the one part of this story that cannot be shaped by grief, or loyalty, or fear. Here is what the GPS record shows. At 9:56 in the morning on July the 4th, the boat carrying Nolan and his friends left its dock, beginning a day that no one on board could have known would end the way it did. By 11:14, it had reached Horn Island. For several hours afterward, the group stayed together, celebrating the holiday the way so many others were doing that same afternoon along that same stretch of coast. At 4:31 that afternoon, according to data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the boat left Horn Island. Nolan was not on board. It returned to its original dock, and then, rather than staying there for the night, it kept moving. At 5:52 p.m., the boat traveled into Fort Bayou. By 6:06, it was back at the dock once again. Later that night at 7:19 p.m., the boat's tracked position shifted one more time to the Fort Bayou boat launch. From there, according to the Marine Resources report, it was taken out of the water entirely and moved over land, presumably towed by a vehicle, to a residence in Biloxi, owned by the boat's owners. Sit with that sequence. 4 separate movements, recorded automatically after the moment Nolan was left behind. Not one simple boat trip home, but a series of stops across several hours, ending on land more than 70 miles from where the day began. That sequence, tracked without any input from anyone connected to this case, is the exact window investigators are still working to fully explain, and the exact window Nolan's parents replay in their minds, over and over, searching for what might have happened inside it. Now to where the official process stands, and what has changed most recently for a family that has spent weeks waiting for anyone in a position of authority to simply sit down and talk to them directly. On July the 15th, Nolan's parents did exactly that. Christine and Elmore Wansley sat down face-to-face with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath, their first direct meeting with her office since Nolan's body was found on Horn Island. Attorney Ben Crump described the meeting afterward as respectful and candid, a small but meaningful shift after more than a week of feeling like they were on the outside of their own son's case. And out of that meeting came confirmation that once the DA's investigation wraps up, its findings will go to a grand jury. That phrase tends to carry more emotional weight than it actually holds, so it's worth being precise here, both for the sake of accuracy and for the sake of a family who has already had their story distorted enough. A grand jury referral is not a verdict. It is not a formal accusation against any one person. It does not mean charges have already been filed, and it does not mean investigators have concluded a crime took place. What it means, specifically, is that the case has reached a procedural point where its findings will be formally reviewed to determine whether charges are warranted at all. It's a mechanism, a process, movement, but not resolution, and this family knows, better than anyone, the difference between those two words. Crump also used the moment to correct something that had spread widely online, the claim that the FBI had effectively taken over this investigation. According to an official statement from FBI Jackson, the Bureau has assisted Jackson County investigators with specific elements of the case, largely centered on threats made against individuals connected to the investigation, threats that crossed state lines and therefore fell under federal jurisdiction. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office remains the lead agency throughout, from the very first search to whatever comes next. The FBI's involvement has been support, not command. And then there is Nolan's phone, the piece of evidence his family has pointed to from nearly the very beginning as something that might hold real answers about his final hours. A small object that has somehow come to carry the weight of an entire family's need to understand what happened to their son. Think about that for a moment. A device small enough to fit in a pocket, ordinary in every way, now sitting at the center of a grand jury referral, an FBI-assisted threat investigation, and a mother's last hope for understanding her son's final hours. That's an extraordinary amount of weight to place on something so small. But for a family with almost nothing else left to hold on to, it's become one of the only tangible things they have. At the July 15th press conference, both sides agreed to something new. A joint inspection, with experts representing the family working alongside experts connected to the official investigation, examining the device together rather than separately, comparing findings in real time instead of releasing competing statements after the fact. Attorney Eric Hertz is leading that effort on the family's side, working with former law enforcement professionals brought in specifically for the technical work involved. As of this recording, that inspection has not yet taken place. The family is still waiting, the way they have been waiting, in one form or another, since the night their son didn't come home. Waiting on a search, waiting on a coroner, waiting on an autopsy, waiting on a meeting with the district attorney, and now, waiting on a phone. Each piece of this case has arrived slowly, on its own timeline, and each time, this family has had no choice but to wait for it. Before we close tonight, two pieces of this case deserve a quick, direct correction, because both of them spread widely, and both of them shaped what people believed about Nolan's death, long before anyone actually checked whether they were true. The first involved a photograph. An image of Nolan at a pool party began circulating online after his body was found, and for a short, disorienting period of time, a significant number of people genuinely believed it proved he had been alive after July the 4th. Somewhere out there, strangers were sharing a photo and quietly hoping it meant Nolan Wells wasn't really gone. Hope that a grieving family had to watch spread, knowing it wasn't true, and having to say so publicly, again and again. It wasn't true. Rolling Stone confirmed, through image metadata and an account from his friend Trayston Shepard, that the photo had actually been taken on June the 27th, a full week before Nolan ever went to Horn Island. It had simply been uploaded online on July the 5th, which is what caused the confusion about its timing in the first place. The second involved a video. Many believed it captured Nolan in an argument shortly before he vanished, treating the recording online as though it were the missing piece of the entire case. Shepard addressed that one directly as well. The voice on the recording, he confirmed, was his own, not Nolan's. Both pieces of misinformation have since been corrected, publicly and clearly. What's left, once you strip them both away, is what was always underneath them from the very beginning. The timeline, the unresolved contradiction between two first-hand accounts, and a family still waiting, patiently and publicly, for someone to give them real answers instead of theories. This case is still open, It remains, in every sense, unfinished. The grand jury hasn't concluded anything yet. The phone inspection, agreed to weeks ago, still hasn't happened. And the contradiction between Katie's account and the account given by Nolan's friends still hasn't been resolved by anyone with the actual authority to resolve it. What we've laid out tonight isn't speculation, and it isn't the version of this story that spread fastest online. It's what has actually been confirmed, by name, by record, by verified reporting, as of today. And it is, in many ways, the very least a grieving family deserves. Not another theory, not another rumor, just the truth, as far as it's currently known, told with the care this story has always required. Somewhere in Ocean Springs tonight, a mother is planning a service for a son she still doesn't fully understand losing. A father is still replaying a driveway, a set of missing keys, a phone call he overheard. And a young woman named Katie, who never asked to become part of a national story, is living with the knowledge that her final conversation with Nolan Wills has become one of the most scrutinized exchanges in the country, even though, by every account, she has done nothing but tell investigators what she remembers. That's the part of this story that's easy to lose underneath the grand jury language and the GPS timestamps and the legal terminology. Underneath all of it, there is still just a family in a small Mississippi community trying to understand how a holiday boat trip with friends ended with their son gone. Nothing about a grand jury referral changes that. Nothing about a joint phone inspection changes that. Those are steps, important ones, but they are steps toward an answer this family hasn't received yet. If this laid the case out more clearly than what you've seen elsewhere, send it to someone who's been following the story, and tell us in the comments which unanswered question you think matters most right now. The conversation on the beach, the GPS timeline, or one of the smaller details this family still can't explain. We'll be back with the next confirmed update, the moment there is one, because somewhere in Mississippi, a family is still waiting for the truth about that night, and they deserve to have it told right, without speculation, without shortcuts, and without anything added that isn't actually known.